There is a backwoods kitchen in Appalachia that never once needed a grocery store to feed the people inside it. Honey jars glowing amber on the shelf, herbs drying from the rafters, cast iron seasoned black over 100 years of daily use. The women who ran that kitchen could pull medicine, a full meal, and a winter's worth of preserved food from a single acre of hill land. Granny witch recipes and old way know-how kept entire communities alive for generations without a single printed cookbook. What exactly did they know, and how much of it can still work for you right now? This wasn't poverty making do. This was a complete system, built piece by piece across generations of hard-won knowledge. Every jar on that shelf had a reason. Every dried bundle overhead had a name and a use and a season. The cast iron didn't just hold heat, it held memory, passed hand to hand the way most families pass down land. And the woman standing at that stove wasn't following a recipe. She was the recipe, every measurement living inside her hands and her nose and her memory. That kind of knowledge doesn't come from a book, and losing it wasn't an accident. Every jar on that shelf had a job, and Granny knew exactly what it was. She didn't organize by category or alphabetical order. She organized by urgency, by season, by what the body needed when sickness or cold came knocking. The vinegar crock sat low and easy to reach, because vinegar touched almost every preservation she made. Dried herbs hung in bundles overhead, sorted by use. The ones for fever, the ones for flavor, the ones for keeping pests out of the flour. A half-empty jar of rendered lard told her winter was running long before the calendar did. She could read that pantry the way a navigator reads a chart, not just what was there, but what the gaps meant. Do you see what that requires? It takes a kind of knowledge that no list could hold, built from years of watching what ran out and what held. That pantry wasn't storage, it was a living record of every season the family had survived, and the next one was already being planned. That garden patch wasn't random. Every plant in it had a job, sometimes 2 or 3 jobs running at once. Yarrow grew along the fence row because it stopped bleeding and kept the deer from pushing through to the beans. Elderberry anchored the corner nearest the door, close enough to reach when fever came on fast in the night. Ramps came up every spring before anything else could, and they weren't just the first green food after a hard winter. They were medicine for blood that had gone thick and slow from months of salt pork and stored root vegetables. Comfrey spread wherever Granny let it, because comfrey knit broken things back together, bones, skin, and worn-out soil alike. You start to see the pattern when you look at the whole garden as one working system rather than a list of separate plants. Nothing was grown purely for beauty, and nothing was grown for just one reason. Even the herbs drying from the rafters overhead had been chosen with the same layered thinking as everything rooted in the ground. What those plants became once they hit the cast iron, that's where the real knowledge lived. Nobody handed Granny a recipe card. She handed you a spoon and told you to watch. The cast iron skillet was already hot, and the lesson had already started before you realized you were in one. Cornbread wasn't measured, it was felt. The batter thick enough to hold a spoon upright, poured when the grease shimmered just right. Soup beans simmered all morning with a ham hock, and the pot knew when it was done long before any timer would. Every dish carried something extra that no ingredient list would ever name. A handful of dried sage from the rafters, wild ramps pulled that same morning. A pinch of something she grew for reasons beyond flavor. You'd eat a bowl of that pinto bean soup and feel settled in a way that went deeper than full. The food was doing more than feeding you, and she knew exactly what it was doing. Those herbs she harvested weren't just seasoning, they were the first quiet layer of the medicine she kept in her kitchen. Every hollow in Appalachia had one, a woman the neighbors came to before they ever thought to call a doctor. She wasn't practicing medicine by any official measure, but she was keeping people alive all the same. The Granny Witch tradition was older than the hills she lived in, carried across the Atlantic and rooted deep into mountain soil. Her kitchen wasn't separate from her medicine cabinet because there was no medicine cabinet. There was only the kitchen. The same elderberries she stirred into jam, she also simmered into syrup for a child burning with fever. Yarrow that dried from the rafters went into supper one week and into a wound poultice the next. She read the body the way a farmer reads weather, by watching, by memory, by a knowledge built over decades of paying close attention. This wasn't superstition dressed up as healing. It was a coherent system, tested across generations on real people with real stakes. A bad remedy didn't just fail, it cost someone a child, a husband, a neighbor. So the knowledge that survived was the knowledge that worked. What's remarkable isn't that these women knew so much. It's that they found ways to keep that knowing alive. None of it was ever written down, and that was never an accident. A girl learned by standing close, watching her grandmother's hands move through a task before she could name what the task was. The knowledge didn't travel through words so much as through repetition, proximity, and the particular weight of a cast iron handle. You didn't study a remedy. You watched it work on someone you loved, and then you remembered. Recipes weren't measured in cups. They were measured in how the dough felt when it was ready, how the broth smelled when the herbs had given everything they had. One woman carried the whole system inside her body, and when she taught, she was teaching you to carry it too. That's a fragile way to keep something alive. A single generation that moved away, that got busy, that thought the old ways were embarrassing, and a thread that took a century to spin could go quiet in an afternoon. So what happened when those women were gone before anyone thought to stand close enough? The women who held all of this together didn't write it down because they never had to. It lived in their hands, in the way they pinched dried herbs and knew by smell what the body needed. Then the roads came, and the company stores, and the government cheese, and the old rhythm broke faster than anyone thought possible. A daughter who might have learned to put up a winter's worth of food went to work in a textile mill instead, and the knowledge simply waited for someone who never came. Recipes that had no name, remedies that had no measurements, the particular way a woman read a fever or a failing garden, none of that fits in a pamphlet. What was lost wasn't just food. It was a whole language for living close to the land, spoken only between people who trusted each other completely. Some of it is gone the way a fire goes, nothing left but the shape of the ash. But some of it is still warm, if you know where to put your hands. None of it is gone. It's just been waiting for someone to reach back and pick it up. Start with the cast iron. Season it, cook in it every single day, and let it teach you patience the way it taught every woman before you. Dry a bundle of herbs from your ceiling and you'll understand why that kitchen smelled the way it did. Make 1 jar of fire cider this fall, and you've got a medicine cabinet that costs almost nothing. Learn to read a simmer the way Granny read the weather, by feel, by smell, by the sound it makes against the pot. These aren't museum pieces sealed behind glass. They're living tools that still do exactly what they were always meant to do. The women who built this tradition didn't have a recipe for every hard thing they faced, but they had a kitchen that held them steady. You can have that too, and the knowing starts the moment you decide it's worth keeping.